My name is Isabella Monroe. I'm 27 years old, and this is my real story. I never thought the people I loved most would turn into my worst enemies, but life has a cruel way of showing you the truth. Growing up, my family seemed perfect from the outside. A loving mother, a supportive stepfather, and a younger stepsister who I thought would be my best friend forever, but behind closed doors. Jealousy, greed, and secrets began to slowly poison everything. One night, a shocking betrayal changed the way I saw them forever. It wasn't just about hurt feelings, it was about survival, about standing up for myself, and about making sure those who tried to destroy me would never succeed. This is the story of how I uncovered the lies, faced my fears, and fought back in ways they never saw coming. If you think you know how bad family betrayal can get, wait until you hear this. Before I begin, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this channel so you never miss a story like this. This story is written and edited by Dark Life Side Diaries. From the time I was a teenager, I had a strange feeling my stepfather Charles never truly liked me. He was the kind of man who smiled at family gatherings but would glare at me when no one was watching. My mom Elena always told me it was just my imagination, that Charles was under a lot of stress and that he was trying his best. I wanted to believe her because the last thing I wanted was more tension in our home. Then came Lily, my stepsister, who was 2 years younger than me. At first, we were inseparable, sharing close secrets and late-night talks, but as we got older, something shifted. Lily started acting like she was in competition with me over everything: my grades, my friends, even my mother's attention. I brushed it off as normal sibling rivalry, but I had no idea how deep her resentment really went. The first major crack in our perfect family came when I got into Columbia University. It was my dream school, and I had worked endlessly to get there. Everyone congratulated me except Charles and Lily. Charles said nothing, and Lily muttered something about me probably failing and coming back home anyway. I laughed it off at the time, but those words stuck with me. When I left for college, I tried to keep in touch, calling my mom every weekend. But soon she stopped picking up as often, and when she did, she seemed distracted, almost like she was hiding something. I figured maybe she was just busy, but in my gut I knew something was off. When I graduated and moved back home for a few months before starting my new job, the atmosphere was different. My room had been given to Lily while I was away. My things were packed into boxes in the garage. I told myself it was temporary, but the way Lily smirked when she showed me the new look of my old room felt deliberate, almost mocking. Charles barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was only to criticize something: my clothes, my job, my attitude. Mom seemed caught in the middle, but instead of defending me, she just stayed silent. I told myself to be patient, that I'd be out of there soon and living my own life, but I had no idea how bad things were about to get. One night, I overheard a conversation in the kitchen. I had gotten up for water, and as I reached the hallway, I heard Charles's voice, low, angry, and filled with bitterness. "She's not going to take what's ours," he said. Lily's voice followed, dripping with venom. "Don't worry, Dad. I've already started making sure she has nothing to her name." My blood ran cold. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear more. They were talking about me, about my inheritance, about my late father's property that was supposed to come to me when I turned 28. Lily was helping Charles find a way to take it all. The property wasn't just land, it was where my father had built his dream home before he died in an accident when I was 10. It was all I had left of him. Didn't sleep that night. My mind was racing with questions. How long had they been planning this? Did my mom know? And if she did, why wasn't she stopping it? I decided I had to find proof, something I could use to protect myself. The next day, when Charles and Lily left the house, I went into his office. I knew he kept his important documents in a locked cabinet, but I had seen him enter the code before. 3214. My hands shook as I opened the drawer. Inside were folders, bank statements, and there it was, a legal document with my name on it. My heart sank as I read through it. It was a forged letter, supposedly from me, giving up my rights to my father's property. The signature looked almost perfect, but I could tell it wasn't mine. They were already setting the stage to take everything. I took photos of every page with my phone and put everything back exactly as I found it. My hands were trembling, but I knew this was my chance to turn the tables. I couldn't confront them, yet not without a plan. I needed someone who knew the law, someone who could help me fight back. I thought of my father's old friend, Mr. Dawson, who was a lawyer in town. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but if anyone could help me, it was him. The only problem was that if Charles or Lily suspected, I knew they might accelerate their plan. So I had to play the part, smile at the dinner table, make small talk, and pretend I was clueless, all while quietly gathering more evidence. Days turned into Weeks and the tension in the house grew heavier. Lily was constantly on her phone, whispering and smirking when I walked in the room. Charles avoided me unless it was to make a snide comment. My mom seemed more withdrawn than ever, and I started to wonder if she was being manipulated too. I knew one thing for sure: if I wanted to protect my father's legacy and make them pay for what they were doing, I had to be smarter, faster, and more ruthless than they ever imagined. What I didn't realize yet was that this fight would uncover secrets far darker than I was prepared for. I stood there frozen in my own living room, the sound of my mother's trembling voice still echoing in my head as she repeated the words I never thought I'd hear. "Emma, your father, he's not the man you think he is." And though she tried to remain strong, I could see her eyes glistening with the same pain that now clawed at my chest. My whole life I had believed my father, Richard Lawson, was this hard-working, principled man who'd done everything to give me a good life, but that night Mom handed me a small metal lockbox, and inside was a stack of old letters, photographs, and bank statements that shattered the fragile image I carried. For 23 years they weren't just love letters, they were dated during the years he was supposedly away working late or on business trips, and each one bore the signature of a woman named Valerie Whitmore, who, according to Mom's whisper, wasn't just some fling, but the woman my father had been living a double life with for decades, secretly funneling money to her while letting us struggle through years when Mom had to sell jewelry to pay bills. The betrayal was like a burning hole in my chest, but what twisted the knife deeper was when Mom admitted she had kept it from me because she wanted me to love him without resentment, until she couldn't hide it anymore after learning that Valerie's son, a boy named Kyle, wasn't just some neighbor kid. He was my half-brother, my father's other child, and that's when everything inside me broke into jagged pieces. Yet instead of collapsing, something dark and determined began to rise inside me, because I realized Dad's betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was strategic, as he had been using our family's savings to build Valerie and Kyle a life while pretending to be broke at home. The next few days were a blur of digging through financial records, tracing hidden accounts, and making late-night visits to places Dad didn't know I knew about. And with every new piece of evidence, my anger sharpened into something cold and calculated, because I didn't just want to confront him, I wanted to dismantle the comfortable little life he had built in secret without giving him a chance to cover his tracks. I started small, anonymously leaking information to Valerie's landlord about irregular payments, which led to questions about whether she could keep her apartment. Then I hacked into Dad's cloud storage. Years of watching tech tutorials finally paid off, and found photos of him at expensive dinners, gifts for Valerie, and even a picture of Kyle standing in front of the brand new car Dad had bought him last year, while my own car had been sitting in the shop for months waiting for a repair I couldn't afford. I could barely keep my rage in check when Dad came home each night acting like nothing was wrong, eating the dinner Mom cooked while she smiled through silent tears, and I wanted to scream at him to throw the evidence in his face, but instead, I played the long game. I listened, I watched, I made copies of every file, every transaction, and every piece of correspondence until I had a folder thick enough to destroy him both personally and professionally, because I knew the company he worked for had strict codes of ethics about conflicts of interest and financial misconduct, and if they found out he'd been funneling money through company accounts to fund a mistress, his career would implode overnight. Still, there was one missing piece I needed before I struck: proof that Valerie knew about us and didn't care, proof that she wasn't just some naive woman in love, but an active participant in the destruction of my family. So I set up a fake social media profile and reached out to her, pretending to be someone from an investment group interested in a family-oriented project. And she took the bait almost instantly, bragging in messages about her partner, who had 2 families but took care of her first. And when she slipped up and sent me a photo of a necklace, I recognized a necklace my mother had once owned but went missing years ago. That's when my blood turned to ice, because it wasn't just money Dad had stolen from us, it was pieces of our lives. I knew I had enough to ruin them, but the thought of simply exposing the affair felt too clean, too quick, and I wanted them to feel the slow burn of humiliation, the kind that seeps into every corner of your life until you can't breathe without tasting shame. So I began to craft a plan, one that would pull every support they had right out from under them, leaving them to watch their little empire crumble brick by brick. While I stood there not as a victim but as the architect of their downfall, the first move in my plan was subtle enough that no one could trace it back to me, yet devastating enough to set the cracks spreading. I started by sending an anonymous package to Dad's company's compliance department. Inside was a neat bundle of printed Screenshots showing wire transfers from his corporate account to Valerie's personal one, along with timestamp photos of him on so-called business trips that were actually romantic getaways. And though I knew they'd investigate quietly at first, the fact that I sent a copy of the same package to one of the local business reporters meant that the story would leak, whether or not the company wanted it to, and when it did, the scandal wouldn't just be contained to the office, it would follow him everywhere. Within a week, whispers began to spread at his workplace, and I could see it in his face every evening as he came home, his tie slightly loosened, eyes darting the confident posture he always carried now sagging under the weight of something he didn't dare share with us. And while he paced through the house like a trapped animal, Valerie must have been feeling the pressure too, because her social media suddenly went quiet, the once constant stream of beach selfies and dinner posts replaced by silence, which only made me push harder. Next, I anonymously tipped off the private school that Kyle attended, forwarding them concerns about the source of his tuition payments, and since the school prided itself on being ethically funded, they launched their own review, forcing Valerie to attend a meeting she couldn't charm her way out of. I wasn't there, but I heard enough from the mutual acquaintances I planted in her online friend circle to know it had rattled her badly. And that was exactly what I wanted, because while they were busy trying to plug the holes I was preparing to flood, I took the photo of the necklace, my mother's necklace, and crafted a carefully worded email from a fake address, sending it to Valerie with a message that read, "You'll be wearing this in court soon." And though she never replied, I knew it had hit its mark when I saw her at the grocery store 2 days later, pale and jumpy, scanning the aisles like she expected someone to leap out at her. The satisfaction of watching her unravel was almost intoxicating, but I knew the final blow had to come at just the right time, so I waited until the company's investigation into Dad reached its peak before releasing the most damning evidence, a short grainy video of him clearly drunk bragging to a friend about keeping 2 women happy and laughing about how he used corporate accounts because no one's gonna check as long as I hit my number, is a video that I anonymously posted to a small community forum, knowing it would spread like wildfire once people recognized him. The fallout was immediate. The next morning, Dad left the house in a storm, his phone buzzing nonstop, Mom standing at the kitchen counter like a statue, not asking questions because she already knew the answers, and by that afternoon his company had suspended him pending termination. Valerie, on the other hand, was suddenly posting vague messages about needing a break and people being so cruel, clearly trying to paint herself as the victim, but it was too late by now. Friends, neighbors, and even some of her own family had turned against her, and the perfect image she'd cultivated was rotting in public. Yet despite the damage, I didn't feel done, because while I had stripped them of their dignity and security, I still hadn't made them feel the same helplessness they had forced on my mother for years. So my next move would have to be personal, something that cut them where they lived, both literally and figuratively, and for that I needed to get closer than I'd ever been to either of them, which meant walking straight into the lion's den with a smile on my face and a lie on my tongue that they wouldn't be able to resist. I knew they'd both be desperate by now, grasping for any lifeline that could pull them out of the wreckage I carefully created. So when I accidentally bumped into Valerie at a coffee shop and pretended to be warm and sympathetic, spinning a story about how I always thought she was misunderstood and how maybe we could start fresh for the sake of family, she bit down on the bait without hesitation, smiling through the thin veil of exhaustion that clung to her like cigarette smoke. And within a week, she'd invited me over for dinner at the house she shared with Dad. Walking into that place felt like stepping into enemy territory. Every wall, every polished surface screaming with the life they'd built on stolen happiness. But I kept my smile easy, my voice light, while my eyes cataloged every detail, from the drawer in the hallway where she kept important mail to the file cabinet in Dad's study that was, to my quiet delight, completely unlocked. After dinner, when they stepped into the backyard to talk privately, I slipped into the study and pulled what I needed: tax records, property deeds, and a particularly incriminating envelope from an offshore bank that I knew would look very bad in the hands of the IRS. And by the time I rejoined them outside, my purse was a little heavier, but my expression never gave me away. Over the next few days, I began planting subtle seeds of paranoia between them, sending Valerie anonymous texts suggesting Dad was hiding money from her, while sending Dad printed screenshots of fake messages between Valerie and another man, making it look like she was lining up a new financial plan in case he went under. The tension grew thick enough to taste, and the breaking point came one humid Friday evening when their argument spilled out onto the porch, voices rising until Valerie screamed something about calling the cops before you dragged me down with you, a promise she apparently kept, because an hour later, 2 unmarked cars rolled up to the house and officers emerged with a warrant in hand. I wasn't there, but I heard from a very reliable source, a neighbor who'd never liked Valerie, that they searched the house top to bottom, leaving with boxes of files and electronics while Valerie sat on the curb crying into her hands and Dad stood beside her silent and pale. The next morning news broke that both of them were under federal investigation for fraud and embezzlement, and while neither was arrested that day, the damage was permanent. Their bank accounts frozen, their reputations annihilated, their friends scattering like roaches. Mom and I watched it all unfold quietly from the safety of our own kitchen, and for the first time in years, I saw her smile without the shadow of pain in her eyes. In the weeks that followed, Dad moved into a shabby apartment alone. Valerie vanished from social media entirely, and I made sure the house they once flaunted was sold off to cover their legal debts, leaving them both with nothing but the ruins of the life they'd stolen. Some might say I went too far, but the truth is I gave them back exactly what they gave my mother: years of fear, betrayal, and humiliation, only I wrapped it in precision and patience until it bloomed into something they could never escape. And as I stood in our backyard one quiet evening watching Mom laugh with her friends, the weight I carried for so long finally lifted, replaced by a calm, steady certainty. Justice isn't always handed down in a courtroom. Sometimes you have to build it yourself, piece by piece, until it stands tall enough to block out the people who once cast you in their shadow forever. Thanks for watching this video. Please like, share, and subscribe.